That morning, the courtroom felt colder than it had any right to be. The air carried the sharp, sterile smell of wax and unease, as though even the walls were bracing themselves to choose a side. Cameras clicked somewhere behind me, flashes catching on the brass plate engraved with Judge Ruth O'Connor, my mother's friend. Naturally, Councilwoman Elaine Rivers sat across the aisle, her posture practiced, her chin raised with that polished political poise. Beside her, Patrick Rivers, my father, kept his eyes anywhere but on me, as if silence could hide guilt. Her lawyer shuffled his papers with the confidence of someone certain the ending was already written. Then came the sentence that cut deeper than any accusation. This girl only knows how to squander what she never earned. That girl was me, the daughter she'd discarded for years. Now the obstacle between her and the inheritance my grandmother, Jean Abbott, left behind. What chilled me wasn't greed. It was how effortlessly she wielded cruelty. The judge dipped her chin, just slightly, and the attorney smirked, that small, self-satisfied curve reserved for men who assume connections outweigh truth. But I'd been preparing for this moment since I learned that fairness in Redmond Hills usually came with a price. My heartbeat steadied. My voice didn't waver. When I stood, the scrape of my chair against marble sounded like the start of an ending. 2 words. That was all it would take to shatter the performance. Judicial disclosures. If you've ever watched someone turn family into a weapon, you'll want to hear what happened next. Hit like, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe. Because what unfolded in that courtroom rewrote everything they believed they controlled. Childhood never felt like a beginning. It felt like enduring a house designed for someone else's dreams. Redmond Hills was flawless on the surface, perfect lawns, polished families. But inside our home, affection was measured out like a rare, expensive fragrance. My mother, Councilwoman Elaine Rivers, treated warmth like a political strategy. My father, Patrick Rivers, existed quietly in the shadow her ambition cast. I learned early that silence pleased her. Approval came from obedience, stillness being invisible. But Jean Abbott, my grandmother, never required quiet to love me. She carried sunlight into every space, smelling of cedar and lavender. Her hands were steady, her laugh unfiltered, her kindness intentional. She used to say, money is meant to serve purpose, not ego. Jean created a small community foundation that offered scholarships to local students. I used to trail behind her every weekend. The walls were lined with photos of graduates she'd helped. They remind me why we do this, she told me once. I didn't grasp it then, but I do now. Elaine and Jean shared blood, but nothing else. My mother saw generosity as a weakness. My grandmother saw it as responsibility. During elections, Elaine transformed into a stage version of herself, perfect stance, practiced smile, speeches about family, values she never lived. Jean stayed far away from those events, calling them theatrics. Their distance became permanent long before I was old enough to understand sides. Jean never flaunted wealth, but she had more than enough. Years of quiet, careful investing made her financially untouchable, something my mother couldn't manipulate. That independence irritated Elaine more than poverty ever could. When the forgetting started, it was subtle. Misplaced keys, repeated stories, lost days. At first, I blamed age. Then I learned the word Alzheimer's, and everything shifted. I Was 22 when Jean sold her large house and moved into a cottage on the edge of town. I moved in with her. My mother didn't object, it made her campaigning easier. Those 2 years became my education in love. Jean's mind flickered like an old film, jumping scenes but never losing its warmth. Even when she forgot my name, she smiled as though her heart still knew me. She hummed old melodies while I paid bills and made dinner. I learned patience from repetition, resilience from exhaustion, and grace from watching her fade without bitterness. Elaine visited only when cameras were present. She came with photographers, bouquets, and staged concern. Nurses whispered about how perfectly put together she looked, as if appearance equaled love. I kept quiet because anger is useless against someone who converts guilt into branding. The last winter was the stillest. Jean spoke less, slept more, held my hand a little longer. One night, I found her old notebooks, letters, recipes, speeches she never delivered. Among them was a sealed envelope marked, for Callie. Inside was a letter and a notarized will. She left everything, her estate, savings, and foundation, to me. She wrote that kindness had to be passed down the same way money was, or it would disappear. When she died that spring, the house felt larger, but the tears didn't come. Grief had moved in long before she left. I arranged the funeral alone. Elaine arrived in black silk, greeting donors with photo-ready sorrow. Her speech about family unity earned polite applause that made my stomach tighten. For a while, peace existed in paperwork. I settled the estate, responded to condolences, and stepped into running Jean's foundation. Then an envelope showed up at my door, Keller and Associates, my mother's lawyers. Someone had told her about the will. That evening, she appeared without warning. I remember the sharp click of her heels, the shift in the air when she saw the documents. The mask of public grace fell away, revealing something colder than grief. Power doesn't mourn, it schemes. In her eyes, I wasn't her daughter anymore. I was the barrier between her and control. That was when I understood that love in our family had skipped a generation, and the one person who had cherished me was gone. What remained was the start of a battle I hadn't asked for, but would have to finish. By early autumn, peace was little more than a rumor. The hills around Redmond glowed gold, pretending serenity while tension tightened beneath the surface. My mother had found her stride again, not in parenting, but in conflict wrapped in the language of politics. It started as murmurs that eventually developed identities of their own. Articles followed. They wore compassion like a costume, but each one was engineered as a snare. Daughter inherits fortune amidst family unrest. Every sentence hinted at manipulation. Every photo positioned beside words like greed and betrayal. In Redmond Hills, gossip wasn't just noise, it was currency. Councilwoman Elaine Rivers understood that better than anyone. She manufactured sympathy the way others drafted policy, her smile perfectly synchronized with headlines. I didn't need anyone to confirm it. Her strategy's fingerprints were easy to spot. My father called once, his tone careful, asking whether I could smooth things over quietly. He sounded like a man attempting to negotiate with a storm. I eased him off the call. Grief was no longer a vulnerability. It had hardened into armor. I hired Alicia Grant, the type of attorney whose calm unsettles people. She offered no comfort, only structure. Her first instruction was straightforward: document everything. We weren't aiming to counter emotion with emotion, but to respond to pressure with accuracy. Soon, envelopes began arriving daily. Legal warnings, demands, vague accusations of exploitation. None of them directly accused, each one was designed to drain me. My mother's campaign engine was running flawlessly, wear down the target before the real fight began. Alicia shaped order out of the chaos. We built a record of every call, every quote, every piece of fabricated outrage. They want your reaction, she reminded me. Give them documentation instead. Meanwhile, my mother appeared on television, smiling serenely. Her campaign ads oozed sincerity. She spoke about preserving family heritage and honoring her late mother's principles. The same hand-signing motions against me gestured piously toward voters. Redmond Hills adored her narrative. I became the shadow that made her shine brighter. Reporters lingered outside my office, feigning interest. The foundation's work was drowned out by a scandal that never existed. Through all the noise, Alicia stayed steady. Facts, she said, age better than rumors. So we gathered them. Old bank statements, donation trails, foundation records. The deeper we dug, the clearer the pattern became. One name surfaced too consistently to dismiss: Judge Ruth O'Connor. At first, I brushed it off as coincidence, small city, familiar circles. But Alicia uncovered a pattern of personal donations from the judge to Elaine's campaigns, each one intentionally kept just below public reporting limits. Curiosity became certainty. I started sifting through archived posts, old local articles, forgotten event galleries. Again and again, they appeared together: fundraisers, private dinners, charity galas. Their smiles were easy, almost rehearsed. These weren't snapshots of mere professionalism. They were proof of comfort, a bond strong enough to blur ethical lines. My grandmother used to say, integrity doesn't vanish in a single night, it seeps away until the face in the mirror is a stranger. That's what I saw in those photos. When public slander failed to crack me, the threats shifted. Anonymous messages warned me to rethink my choices. One night, a car idled outside my gate for hours. Fear tried to settle in, but caregiving had trained me for chaos. Remain still, remain steady. Alicia insisted on silence. If you defend yourself publicly, they'll spin it into an admission. So we worked quietly, layering facts like masonry. My apartment transformed into a battlefield, folders stacked tall, timelines covering the walls, every thread tying my mother's influence to the judge's favor. It didn't resemble a home anymore. It looked like a blueprint of corruption. Elaine's empire thrived on control. Mine was built on patience. She had always won by being the loudest. I would win by being precise. Every document felt like its own verdict. Every photograph, a mirror she couldn't run from. The final link surfaced one evening in an old event archive. Judge O'Connor had presided over the opening fundraiser of Elaine's very first campaign. Her signature sat next to my mother's on the sponsor roster, carefully preserved in glossy print. Small, elegant, and damning. I stared at the evidence under my desk lamp. The light washed my hands pale, steady, intentional. Somewhere between exhaustion and clarity, a realization surfaced. This wasn't about inheritance anymore. This was about exposure. For years, she had crafted a machine built to shape public perception. Now that same machine had left a trail too tangled to erase, and the pressure she engineered for me was slowly rebounding onto her. Morning arrived without hope. The sky hung pale over Redmond Hills, indifferent to the quiet storm brewing beneath it. Every battle needs structure, Alicia said. I took her literally. My living room became a command center, folders like stacked stone, timelines pinned across a corkboard, images arranged in clean columns. I didn't need anger to fight. I needed rhythm. Each document felt heavier than paper, carrying decades of my mother's entitlement and the imprint of a system built to safeguard her. Councilwoman Elaine Rivers wasn't simply a mother defending reputation, she was a public figure defending an image, and image obeyed rules sharper than law. Alicia reviewed every file with surgical calm. She assembled our case piece by piece, transforming suspicion into sequence. I watched her turn my fear into evidence, my memories into logic. The work numbed me at first. It demanded discipline, not emotion. While others moved on with life, I lived inside records, tax filings, donation slips, property transfers, event rosters. The repetition became its own ritual. Between the rows of numbers, a sharper pattern emerged. Judge Ruth O'Connor appeared repeatedly on charity boards, in campaign newsletters, in photos at fundraisers organized by my mother's committee. It was no longer coincidence. It was architecture. Elaine had always been a master of optics. Aligning herself with a judge didn't look like corruption when draped in philanthropy. Every gala became a disguise. Every donation, another strand in the same perfectly woven veil. Her strategy worked because it appeared harmless. But paper doesn't fabricate truth. And cameras never forget context. I started gathering more than paperwork. I gathered context. Dates that overlapped, timelines that didn't lie, repeated names on guest rosters, financial filings that echoed each other. Every revelation became another stone in the barrier Alicia had instructed me to construct. A wall built not from fury, but from precision. Outside my quiet work, the public story roared on. My mother's PR machine continued its polished performance. Billboards, interviews, charity events, each perfectly scheduled to suffocate even the faintest trace of scandal. She posed with children receiving scholarships my grandmother once funded, turning heritage into marketing. Watching it felt like mourning disguised as celebration. I stopped hoping for fairness. Justice, I finally understood, wasn't balance. It was endurance. The more pressure they applied, the more anchored I became. Bodies adjust. Hearts learn discipline. Alicia submitted early motions, preparing for the inevitable reckoning. Every document ran through her hands until the language sharpened into weaponry. She believed in accuracy the way soldiers trust armor. Let the evidence speak before you open your mouth, she once told me. And I knew she meant survival as much as strategy. Days blurred into muted dawns. Sleep became negotiable. I woke up thinking of new ways to cross-reference files, verify timestamps, confirm signatures. Routine left no room for fear to multiply. One night, while sorting photographs by date, I spotted something small. The same floral arrangement displayed on two different stages, years apart. The sponsor lists matched exactly. Under the surface-level decorum lay a pattern of financial dependence between the judge's charity and my mother's re-election fund. That tiny repetition, easy to overlook, became the thread stitching everything together. Alicia verified it in hours. The records aligned without friction. "This isn't influence," she said, skimming the documents. "This is infrastructure." She was right. What I'd found wasn't clumsy desperation, it was a structure engineered over years, steady and intentional. It explained why every institution I approached shut its doors with polite smiles. They weren't protecting her innocence. They were guarding their convenience. I realized then that the wall I was building wasn't only a shield. It was a trap, closing around the system that had boxed me in. Each document tightened the noose around their lies until they had nowhere left to move. By late winter, our case was complete. Alicia arranged the evidence in a sequence even the most biased observer couldn't easily dismiss. I memorized every exhibit, every date, every name. Whenever fear tried to surface, I smothered it with facts. Somewhere in that discipline, the balance shifted. My mother's campaign still sparkled from the outside, but beneath the facade her grip was slipping. Anonymous resignations trickled out. 2 donors pulled their support, citing ethical concerns. Her silence thickened. And silence was something I had learned to read fluently. The wall was finished, not with bricks but with truth, arranged so meticulously that nothing built on pretense could withstand it. As the court date neared, I finally recognized the quiet satisfaction my grandmother must have felt each time she chose patience. Revenge, when crafted carefully, doesn't shout. It stands. That morning felt sterile, as if time itself had been scrubbed clean. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited, their lenses lifted like weapons. Inside, the silence had weight. The smell of varnished wood mixed with something colder. Anticipation. I took my seat, breathing in the stillness that always precedes judgment. Councilwoman Elaine Rivers sat across the room, wrapped in a composure almost too flawless. Her attorney, Brian Keller, arranged his papers with rehearsed flair. Power hummed between them, like electricity sealed off behind glass. Judge Ruth O'Connor presided with practiced calm, almost detached. Only I knew the fracture line beneath that serenity. Years of entanglement masked as friendship. Even the air seemed aware of it. When proceedings opened, Brian spoke with the cadence of manipulation. His statements were crafted to sound compassionate, appealing to conscience rather than greed. He painted me as confused, too young to comprehend the weight of inheritance. Each phrase attempted to fold me into something breakable. I didn't respond. Alicia had taught me the discipline of stillness. Let them drain themselves first. The hearing stretched thin, like an elastic band pulled to its limit. The clock marched forward, unforgiving. I sensed the audience tilting, their sympathies shaped by tone rather than truth. That was my mother's specialty, performance mistaken for sincerity. When her turn came, Elaine spoke less like a witness and more like a candidate. She invoked community, sacrifice, and a daughter who had lost her way. Her voice trembled at practiced intervals. To strangers, it would have sounded heartfelt. To me, it was choreography. Then it was my moment. I stood, carrying the folder that had become both armor and blade. The room seemed to tighten as I approached the table. Light from the judge's bench glimmered on the polished floor like a warning. Facts don't need volume. They only need order. Alicia's voice lingered in my mind as I opened the first folder. Each piece of evidence connected to the next donation. Logs, photos, letters, every layer. Exposing the subtle bond between the judge and my mother. No direct accusations, just unmistakable alignment. Patterns so exact they explained themselves. When the final photograph slid across the table, the entire room shifted. It captured Judge O'Connor beside Elaine at a fundraiser. Podium, fingers intertwined, matching smiles. On its own, the photo was harmless. Paired with everything else, it was catastrophic. The silence that followed seemed to pulse. Even Brian Keller stopped writing. For the briefest moment, the judge's composure slipped. Her inhale hitched. Her fingers shook. Then, almost reflexively, she nodded. Agreeing with my mother's earlier accusation about my supposed unworthiness. That tiny gesture was all I needed. The facade shattered in full view. I didn't say a word. The truth was already loud in her posture, her reaction, in the involuntary honesty of instinct. Alicia filed the recusal motion. Within seconds, the courtroom froze as the judge clawed back what little composure she could. But no amount of professional polish could erase what everyone had witnessed. Ruth O'Connor's decision came quickly, robotic, stripped of her usual authority. She affirmed the will, upheld my inheritance, and threw out every claim of undue influence. Her voice quivered through her final remarks, like she was patching leaks in a sinking ship. Elaine's expression stayed still, but the stillness had changed. It wasn't strategy anymore, it was disbelief. Control had always been her doctrine, and I had just turned her devotion into evidence. When the gavel fell, the sound felt like closure made solid. Reporters moved first, chasing soundbites and spectacle. I stayed seated. I watched my mother rise, her face flickering between shock and frantic recalculation. That instant when she realized the story no longer belonged to her was the quietest victory of my life. The days afterward blurred together, stitched with headlines and white noise. The courthouse emptied, but its echoes clung to me. Outside, reporters traded pieces of my life like currency. Inside, the silence of winning felt too heavy to celebrate. Triumph doesn't sound like cheering. It sounds like a clock exhaling after holding its breath far too long. Judge Ruth O'Connor resigned within a week, claiming health issues. The announcement was brief. The Fallout was anything but. The Judicial Review Board launched an investigation. Before her signature dried, each report uncovered another thread: campaign contributions, private engagements, favoritism wearing the mask of charity. Her name became shorthand for broken ethics. Councilwoman Elaine Rivers followed the same downward spiral. The City Council opened an internal ethics probe. Donors vanished. Old allies put distance between them. Her campaign office shut down overnight, windows covered in blank white paper where her slogans once lived. Her social media feeds turned into a void. And for a woman who built her identity on being seen, disappearing was the coldest fate. I ignored the coverage. Alicia managed the aftermath, closing motions, archiving everything for the future. She told me we'd done more than win. We'd revealed a pattern. The word revealed felt sterile, clinical. But uncovering truth is never gentle. It scorches. At night, I felt the sting most. My phone lit up with congratulations I didn't know how to answer. Gratitude felt misplaced. Revenge felt empty. Justice is quieter than people imagine. It doesn't roar. It releases. In Redmond Hills, alliances shifted overnight. The same voices that once praised my mother now praised accountability. The transformation was precise, cold, predictable. Politics doesn't apologize, it adjusts. A few days later, I walked past the courthouse. The steps looked unchanged, yet different. I realized the weight doesn't belong to places. It belongs to people. And those who carry truth eventually set it down. Not because the battle is over, but because they're tired of carrying it alone. Alicia's office called with the final confirmations. The estate was officially mine. Every property, every share, every dollar my grandmother meant for me. The law had spoken. There was nothing left to fight. Yet the moment I signed the final page, I didn't feel rich. I felt the pull of gravity. My grandmother's handwriting flashed across memory. Kindness must outlive fear. The phrase echoed in quiet rebellion against everything my mother embodied. Elaine never reached out. No apology, no defense, not even anger. Her silence felt tactical at first, but later I saw it for what it was: the emptiness left when power falls away, and she didn't have words for that. The news cycle shifted forward, as it always does.